I'll start with a quick introduction. In this session, what I'm trying to do is most of the work I do on a day-to-day basis is around DevOps, right? So, basically, showcase what are some of the tools that I use on a day-to-day basis, specifically with AI and agent skills. So, hopefully, if you are a part of the session, if you're from DevOps, you'll get to learn a lot of things. If you're not from DevOps, right, you still will get to learn a lot of things about automation and agent skills in general. So, I hope you have a great time attending this. So what's the agenda for today? Specifically, well, I'll start with agent skills. Agent skills are an opinionated way of doing things, right? So I'll start with why I use agent skills compared to just agents in general, and then we'll shift to other DevOps specific use cases. We'll look at cost optimization, we'll look at security and compliance in the DevOps space, and then developer feedback. A lot we on a day-to-day basis, the dev in DevOps is working with developers, right? So we work with developers on a day-to-day basis. So how can we use specialized skills that we can help developers to get specified feedback around infra for? And last but not the least, I'll also be giving a quick introduction of how you can use Amazon Q while you are working with AWS itself. Quickly pivoting to agent skills. Agent skills in general are a very opinionated way of doing things, right? So I'll just go through why I use agent skills and what I am trying to solve with that particular. AI agents in general are very capable in themselves. So why use agent skills? If I have to explain it to someone in very easy terms, right? Think of agents as a cook. You can tell a cook to cook you something. It might probably cook it well for you, but it might not turn out the way you want it to be, right? So how do we solve that particular problem? We give a recipe to a cook. A recipe is basically a skill. So we write a recipe saying, I want these ingredients added, I want these particular things to be added in the food, right? And basically a bunch of things, your specific preferences. That's where agent skills come in. We take an agent by any of the AI providers, we give it specific skills and instructions to do one task very properly and kind of have a deterministic output. And why are we interested? We, as DevOps folks, we believe in the Unix philosophy, right? We want our tools to do just one thing and do it very perfectly. That's why I am more lenient to using agent skills versus all of the AI tooling that is currently around. So yeah, why use agent skills? Agent skills, using agent skills, we can have domain expertise that are built by default into our AI agents. We can have repeatable workflows that just works every time, right? Every time I run a skill, I get a similar output as the last time I ran it. That is something I like the most about skills and themselves. And last but not the least, the cross-product portability. That is what I'll be explaining in the next slide as well. So when I say cross product, what do I mean? Agents and agent skills by default were created by Anthropic, which is one of the biggest companies today, right? So while we write all of our automations in agent skills, what we're trying to do is not write it in a technology that might not be around in the future, right? Say if we stick to tooling of a particular company or an AI tool, say we write 100 skills and use cases in that particular tooling, and then suddenly down the line, if Anthropic becomes too expensive for us, we can't just lift and shift that tooling to something else. If we do that via agent skills by default was created by Anthropic, but it's an open standard. By open standard, I mean a lot of other tools also support this. So you can write all of your tooling and skills using agent skills. But say if you don't want to use Claude Code anymore, you don't want to stick to the Anthropic system, you can take all of these skills, take it to Cursor, take it to Gemini, and it will work all the same. So that's why it's an opinionated way of doing things, but a reason to stick to it because it's an open standard. You can create all of your tooling using agent skills and then lift and shift to any other tool that might be in the market or very cheap to use, right? That's how the AI landscape has been going. We usually stick to tools that are easier to learn in the long term. So yeah, that's me explaining why I use agent skills, and then I'll pivot to now using some of the use cases around agent skills. In our day to day, we as DevOps folks, some of the work that we do on a day to day basis is cost optimization, right? We if we are working on the cloud, we get asked a lot. Say our managers will ping us saying, "Hey, how much are we spending in this particular service? What does our monthly spend look like?" The reporting on all these things, right? That's cost optimization for us. And what is the current problem that we face in AWS specifically? If you've worked on AWS, you will be familiar with this, right? Cost Explorer by default is very hard to work with. It has a lot of filters, dimension grouping that we can do. Manual reporting takes a lot of time. It's very time intensive. And then experience is a bottleneck. I've been in the industry for some time now, so I know my way around uh, Cost Explorer and all these related tools, right? But if I were to give the same task to someone who's just starting off, a developer or a junior DevOps engineer, right? They'll have a hard time creating these reports. So one of the first automations that we usually do is around the costing space as well. So how do we solve this? How do we solve the problem of very complex AWS services like Cost Explorer? We introduce a skill layer on top of it. So before I actually go ahead and talk about how what problem does it solve and what the actual thing is, we'll just pivot right to giving a quick hands-on demo, right? That's how I like to do things. So I'll just quickly shift to that. My terminal would be visible to you. The first thing that I'll do is, since all of this practical material is centered around AWS, right? So I'll try to connect to my AWS account. Yeah, I've picked up a role. So just following best practice, right? A temporary credential that will be only visible for 1 hour. It'll expire after 1 hour. And I've made sure I only use read-only credentials. One of the best practices that you can adopt while you're working with AI tools is to give them only read-only access, right? You don't want an AI agent to hallucinate on your production cluster engine, you ending up in the news the next day, right? That is something that we would want to avoid. So yeah, I have linked into my AWS account. I'll just quickly verify whether that access is working or not. That access is working. I can list all the S3 buckets, and then I'll open Claude Code. Currently, Claude Code is my tool of choice because it's lived in the terminals. I think we as DevOps engineers are very drawn to anything that is in the terminal, right? So that is what I'll be using for this demo. You can use any tool that you want. If you build a skill, the whole point is to have a skill work across different tools, right? So whatever I'm showing here, if you build it on your own, it will work across devices and tools. So yeah, I've opened Claude Code. Since I have already assumed this rule, all of the credentials will be baked into the terminal itself. I don't have to manually specify any credentials for this account. So I'll just go in, and then I have a specific skill that is created that I can just trigger. Before I actually go ahead and trigger the skill, I'll just walk you how the skill was written. There are a bunch of different ways on how you can distribute a skill. If you are inside a company that has a Cloud enterprise license or a Teams license, you can distribute skills at the enterprise layer as well. The easiest way to do things is to just create, if you have a central Git repo, you can check everything inside the Git repo itself. So how would that look like? In the base of the root, you can create a .cloud folder, you can create a skills directory, and then all of your specific skills would go inside that directory. So the first thing that we're looking at is cost optimization, right? So I'll just open that. At the start of the sessions, I talked about skill basically being a recipe of how to do things, right? And that is what we're doing. Basically, what I'm writing is the skill name is KS cost optimization, a description of what the skill is doing, and then basically a blueprint of how I want the skill to work. It's very long because I've spent a lot of time writing this, but basically what it is doing is as soon as it has access to an AWS environment, the first thing that it'll do is ask me. As soon as I run this skill, it'll ask me, what is the AWS regions that you want to audit? We would not want to scan all the AWS regions that are there, right? The scan has to be specific to the workloads that I'm running on. So I'll first select the regions that I'm currently running in, the cost explorer discovery phase. One of the hardest problems if you do this via bash scripts or automation is trying to figure out what are the services that I'm currently running. A quick hack for that is in your bill itself, you look at all the bill line items and then you can verify. If I'm billed for this particular service, I'm probably using it. So that's a nice hacky way of understanding which are all the active services in your account. And then after we've done that, we do a deep audit of all the common services that are there. The phase four is after it has done all the auditing, how would I want to get the report? It can be an Excel format, HTML, or both. And then I just refine the skill to add all these initial details, right? What are the permissions that the person running the skill would have, the sizing recommendation, and everything else. On a general level, these are all the high level details. We can go and actually tell the skills about the config that you would want. So basically, what I'm telling it is uh, if you ask for the region, these are some of the regions that, so across my projects, these are some of the regions that I'm using. So I can tell the region input box to be these entries, right? I can have default configuration set so that it does not ask me for everything. That'll be a very uh, cumbersome UI to work with, right? As soon as you open a skill, you have to add 100 entries there. You'd want defaults and then some things that you check as you run this. And then the resource type. I also mentioned what are the resource type that I'm looking to scan as we run this. And then over time, as we gain some experience in AWS, I can give it some specific details around what to look at, right? So I tell it, if you're looking for compute, some of the quick wins here is we should stop EC2 instances when they are not running. We should stop and terminate EC2 instances that they are not running, convert GPT to GPT-3. And these are basic recommendations to the recipes that I'm adding, right? And then the skill itself. So the skill name is KS AWS cost optimization, and there are two ways of triggering it. While you're talking to Claude, if it feels like the problem that Claude is trying to solve matches with the description of your skill, it will run it automatically. But the easier way to do this is to just to trigger it via the slash command. If you're using something like Claude Code or the Claude application itself, we can trigger this directly. So what we are looking to do is a cost optimization, right? So I can do this and just trigger it. So this particular session already has access to my AWS account. It will go ahead, ask me a bunch of questions and do the audit end to end. We'll just wait for this to complete. And this is asking me. So based on whichever environment that I'm connected to, it'll ask me which region are the resources in. So they're currently in US AP South 1, which is Mumbai. And what is the output format of the report that you want? So I just want it currently in HTML. I don't want it text. And then I'll just do a submit. Yeah, and based on the instructions that I've given this particular skill, it will go ahead and scan entirety of AWS and then find whatever details that I want in the format that I want. While this runs, the only thing that I need to cover as well is scripts. So a lot of DevOps folks will already have some automation scripts that they've built in the pre-AI world, right? The good thing about Skills is you can pass it scripts itself also that it can use. So generating generic parsing, getting resources, fetching resources, and all these other things. If you already have Bash scripts or Python scripts that are already there, you can supply that as a supplement helper as well. And it's done. Imagine doing this by hand. This will take at least beginner a couple of hours, right? And then while it runs it, I've also mentioned it in the skill itself to do only read-only edit. It will not perform any write to your system. So there's two levels of check. The credentials that I'm supplying it is read-only. The I've told the skill itself to do read-only operations. and it creates the entire report for me. It also does an overview of how things are looking. So the current account that I'm connected to is a training account. There are resources all across the board. It does not follow a lot of standards, right? Because it is training, people create and delete resources here. So that was, yeah, uh, it generated an overview for us that we can look at. This is good to look at it first, but I'd rather see the overall report, right? So let me open that. So a Cloud Code tip for you guys, if you don't already know, if you started with an exclamation mark, it will run it as a shell command instead of a prompt command. I'll just open that. Yeah. So the whole report is ready. The original goal was for me to do cost optimization, right? And that's what the report is trying to cover for me. So the executive summary is there are a bunch of idle and wasteful resources. If I clean those up, I'll be saving around $26. So on a service wise, I just want to know on a high level how much am I spending every month, right? And this is the cost. If I just sort it by the month and month change, the highest is Amazon CloudWatch config, everything marked as red. I know this is something that I have to investigate. Everything else, this stays the same. Month and month change, it can be a plus, it can be a minus, the total cost of the service, billing trends over time, how billing have changed in that particular AWS account. I can filter it via the change percentage. Yeah. So basically, this tells us this everything is in red is something that is not expected. And this has changed a lot across over time, right? The spike is greater than 30%. So I can do a manual review in this case. If not a manual review, if I'm comfortable with this information, I can just delete resources, create resources, change anything that is needed. We get a 30-day trend as well. And then we get an automated cost saving opportunity. If we were to do this manually, right, this is a day or two worth of effort. This was completed in mere minutes as soon as I run this. So what are the findings that we find for us? We have elastic IPs that are unused, EBS volumes that are unattached. These should ideally be deleted. We have NAT gateways, and there are some recommendations around what to do with this. Ideally, move to gateway interface endpoints. We have ECR repos with no lifecycle policy. This is a testing account, so all of these make sense. And yeah, we get basic recommendations around what are some of the things that we can do to reduce our overall costs. And this is what we want to do. This is a testing account, so not a lot of findings. But if you run this in an AWS account that has run over a period of time, we've done this for a potential client as well. We get a lot of actionable findings that we can work on. And the if you just want to get an overall cost of how much you're spending on each services, you get that as well. And the account details are here. So basically, end-to-end coverage of all of your services, how it has changed over time, you get it in one single report that you can consume yourself, give it to another team member that can actionably work on this, right? So I'll go back to my slides. Yeah, as I just showed you, the skill layer. The harder part was Cost Explorer, right? We've moved away from that. We've introduced agent level automations around it. So as soon as we run it, we get anomaly detection, right sizing recommendation, idle resources. What used to take hours or days, we can do it in minutes now. Coming to our next use case, we as DevOps engineers also do a lot of security and compliance related work, right? We get pinged around, is our org following the latest standard? If you are under SOC 2 or any specific compliances, a lot of work there as well. So if you have a certain list of standards that you want to adhere to, you can create agent skills around that as well. So currently what most DevOps engineers do is they have bash scripts, Python scripts that do all of this, right? and it's very hard to maintain in the long run as checks gets added, checks get removed, exclusions and all of it. It just is very complex to do. We have been doing that for a long time. I think as soon as AI and AI agents came in, the whole process became a lot easier. Yeah, and the idea is to have a single pane of glass, right? Depending on whatever your standards are currently for your AWS accounts or your workloads, the goal is to have a certain checklist of checks that you'd want to have and see whether resources are compliant or whether they're not compliant. Yeah, I'll pivot to another demo as well. It'll be very similar to the cost optimization demo. The next part is tag security. The skill also would sound the same, will look the same as well. We give it specific instructions to do audit based on tagging, that is the security groups, all the security related services, right? We tell it the required tags are owner, project. The overall view is the same as the previous one. It first asks for region, which is the region that you'd like to run this audit on, tag and security audit. And then as soon as it runs the audit, it'll ask you whether you need an Excel report or an HTML report based on whatever you're trying to feed this into. You can also mention the list of resources that you'd like to get audited as well. You can give sample audit commands that it can use, security findings, secrets managers, how to scan, and then just basic guidelines around what the pipeline should be. If you have references, if you have best practice references that are usually available on AWS, you can link that too. So the skill can use all of these contents to do a better audit of the system. The same goes for this as well. You can write helper supplementing scripts to additionally improve how the skill is working, and then references. We can give it script or plain text references on how it can do the audit, how it can find the resources itself. And we have the high level config as well. So we tell it which are the tags that we're looking for, key tags, recommended tags, regions that we're trying to scan, the services that we're trying to scan. I'll go back. I'll quickly do a clear on the session because both the sessions are unrelated, right? We would not want to bloat our current session history. The session is cleared. Yeah. And if this Claude setup looks a bit different from what you are usually used to, it's a different OMC based setup. Maybe I can do another webinar on that as well. But yeah, uh, it basically shows how much context that I've used, how the current session is, and then the current context as well. So I'll go ahead and quickly run the other skill as well. The credentials are already synced up to the terminal because I did that in the previous demo as well. So I'll just quickly start it. And it will go ahead, ask me a bunch of questions around which region, what is the output type, and everything else. It successfully loaded the skill. As soon as I do a / name of the skill, it will load that skill into context and basically have an idea of what I'm trying to do, right? This workloads are also in the Mumbai region, so I'll choose AP South 1. What is the kind of reporting that I want? I want just an HTML report, and I do a submit. And we'll keep this running for some time. It'll ask me a bunch of permissions. If you want to completely automate this, you can have it in the whitelist as well, the script that you're trying to run. But I like to look over it, trying to see what it does. And one of the things to talk about as well is the amount of tokens that I'm consuming. It's not a lot. If you were to do this directly via an agent, it has to figure out everything on the fly, right? It has to figure out how to write the script, how it will scan AWS, what are the things to check. It'll read a bunch of MCP servers if it provided, and the token just bloats up. And yeah, the audit is complete. The report is generated in this particular folder. Let me open that. And it gives you a general summary as well. in the report itself. If you don't want to open the report and just have a general summary of how the findings were, it gives you a general summary as well. Yeah. The previous reporting that we did was around cost. The current reporting is around security and audit, right? We're trying to see if tag compliance is there and what are the security findings in our current account. Then in the overview page, you get a high level compliant resources overview as well. So tag compliance, you can just look at all the resources that are currently there and if they're compliant or not. Status compliant basically means for tag compliance, we ask people to have some sort of tagging standards, right? Owner and project is the mandatory tags. They can add a status in compliant based on the standards that you're currently following. If it's SOC 2, whatever is your internal compliance status, if you need a change the skill of how it's working, you can change the recipe to only scan for those particular resources. So we get a status of these are the resources that are there. They have been tagged properly. Some of these resources are partially tagged, so missing key tags, and then the remediation. So I can actually take this report out. If a separate team is handling the account or a bunch of devs are handling the account, we can send that report to the devs as well. You need to tag these resources properly if you were to run this long term. And since this is a testing account, not everything is currently tagged, right? As we would expect. Security findings. We got the tag compliance of all the resources that are currently on AWS. We now have to pivot towards security. The skill that I've currently written is that has been cleaned up a bit so that it runs a bit quickly. You can extend the skill to have guard duty findings, AWS inspector findings, every security services that you can think of, right? Currently is doing a high level scan of the network layers that are there, NACL, security groups, anything related. So it will just walk through all the instances, check the security groups, and then find, okay, port 22 is exposed. What is the remediation? We need to remove this ingress rule. And it will look at all of your services. So you can get a high level reporting of your what your current exposure stats are on the network itself. I can scroll through all the instances that are there, not only the standard ports. If it finds 5432 Postgres is installed, open to the internet, all the findings can be found as well. And might not make a lot of sense for the non-DevOps folk, but if the DevOps folks here in this call, if they had to make this by hand, it'll take us a bunch of days, right? And we do this in a few minutes using AI. So one of the things that we can automate. So yeah, tech compliance and then executive summary basically tells us the overall picture of how our what the posture looks like, the tag and security posture. And if we were to send this to someone, maybe a junior DevOps engineer, he has enough idea about what the gaps are and how to actually remediate that also using AWS CLI. A remediation tab is helpful because we would not want to do this via AI, right? We might not want to do this via AI because if we are a production system, we always want to have a human in the loop that can verify whether this is valid or not. If the thing with AI is it might hallucinate sometimes. So probably best to have a human in the loop, verify what the remediation is, run it, judge whether the workload is production or not, plan for it, and then so it just figures out all the planning and reporting that we have to do, but we still have to do some of it ourselves. Yeah, I'll go back to the slides. So yeah, you can write specialized skills around then tag compliance security standard and then get an overview of what things are. And this can be whatever you check for, right? Does not have to be security groups alone, guard duty findings, inspector, security hub, whatever is specific to your organization is what you can include in the skill and this automate the end-to-end reporting that we have to do. Developer feedback. I feel it's I started out as a developer myself, so I have great fun working with developers. And a lot of developers that I work with are also interested in the infrastructure side of things, right? They want to contribute. And I think it's best to have them contribute as well. Developers learning infrastructure is what makes them the really good developers. So that is what I try to do in my projects as well. But the bottleneck is if you are running if you are part of a project that does not have a lot of DevOps folks, right? If you have one or two DevOps folks and you do a lot of infrastructure as code. By infrastructure as code, I mean all of your infrastructure is managed through things like cloud formations or Terraform. It gets the DevOps folks in the team become the single point of failure, right? Or the bottleneck in the whole situation. What happens in those scenarios is the devs try to learn the standards around infrastructure. They try to learn Terraform. Since they come from a coding background, Terraform relatively looks easy because there's not a lot of logic involved, right? They're just templates. We define our resources. We want it to look a certain way, and they just jump in and try to contribute to that whole flow. What is the problem around that? The problem around that is the endless back and forth. We as DevOps folks have read through the whole best practices standard. We know our infrastructure in and out. There are some standards that we try to follow. There are some tagging standards that we try to follow. We know cost optimization, the kind of DB workloads that we should provision, whether it should be single AZ, multi AZ, the kind of instances that we have to provision given their cost. So what I've seen in my previous projects as well, when developers try to get into this flow, is there's a lot of back and forth between the devs and the DevOps team and the dev team. They write infrastructure spec that seems right to them. They send it over to the DevOps team. The DevOps team reviews it end to end. A lot of changes are requested. It goes back. They make the changes. It comes back to the DevOps team, and there's this endless ping pong sort of situation where the devs feel the code that they're writing is correct because it works, but we expect a lot of things from our infrastructure that we're provisioning, right? And that itself is a huge context switch for DevOps folks. If you're constantly working with developers to try to understand and try to give them insight about the infrastructure, that takes up a lot of our time as well. And then that slows down the whole delivery cycles, right? If a PR is going back and forth between a DevOps engineer and a developer, that slows the whole cycle a lot. And this is coming from a project that I recently implemented, right? This is coming from real world problems that we are facing and then the solution that we're trying to get. What can we do? The devs want to contribute to the infrastructure, right? We want them to contribute. It takes a bit of load from our end, but the endless back and forth is something that we cannot do, right? How do we solve this? Turns out agent skills are a good fit for this use case as well. I'll just switch over to VS Code and try to explain what I'm talking about, right? Say you're a developer who's just starting out, you've learned Terraform, you're very eager to contribute to the infrastructure with your DevOps team, right? You write something like this. We can't blame you also. You've just learned Terraform, you don't know all the best practices that are there. You try your best to get a VPC out, a subnet out, some RDS instances, an AWS instance, and a DB instance, right? This looks good to you. It ran in your test environment for some reason, and then you're trying to get this officially to QA or staging or some other place, right? Normally, what happens is you check this in a repo somewhere, assign it to a DevOps engineer, he reviews it and gives you a bunch of responses. And then you actually have to wait for the DevOps engineer to be free, review your PR, give manual insights. That just slows down the whole process a lot, right? What can we do in this particular scenario? That's where the third agent skills come in. I'll just clear my context. Yeah, let me do an ls here. So I'm currently in the same folder where the Terraform file is present. So I'll just go into that. Or maybe I can run the skill in the top level as well. So I'll trigger the skill using ops code review. So this is a local skill where developers can run it in their own local machines while they're developing it. The idea would be that in imagine where your infrastructure as code is being maintained, right? In the same repo, we'll have a code skills and then the exact skill that we want to review. The ops code review skill will be present in the repo itself. So as soon as the developer clones it, the skill is ready for it for the developer to use. So I can go ahead and trigger the skill as well. So then it will start looking for Terraform files that are currently in the present directory. So even if it did not find it in the root directory, it'll do a grep scan and then it found the main.terraform file altogether, right? So it'll look at the Terraform file. While it does that, I'll just pivot over and show you what the actual skill is doing. Yeah, this is a mouthful, but basically what I'm telling it is your name is KF Soft Review. What are you trying to do is review Terraform code and then give your inputs around best practices and how they should look like. And this is the high level prompt, the workflow. And in a real world scenario, this will be a Git repo which will already have a lot of commits, right? So the first thing that will try to do is do a Git diff to understand what is the latest commit that the developer is trying to check in and not give him instructions around everything that was previously checked in, right? We're just concerned about the latest code that is coming. So it'll do a Git diff and check what the latest code and then only give feedback around that context. It'll do a tag compliance audit as well. So the whole audit thing comes in two fronts, right? If we solve it in the root itself, when developers are trying to check in their code or infrastructure, if tags are properly supplied in that front, we don't have to fix it at the ops level. That's what one of the things that we try to do. So we tell the skill itself if someone is trying to create a resource, these are some of the mandatory skills, mandatory tags that will be needed in the resource itself and just basic instructions around how it can find the tags, how it can work the tags. It'll do a security deep dive as well. It'll look at IAM permissions if it is being introduced. We don't want wildcard scoped IAM permissions, right? We don't want developers and IAM roles to have access through all of AWS, EC2, S3, IAM. Some security related configs are also present. We don't want them to expose their workloads to the public internet. We look at security groups. We also give guidelines around what are some of the things that you check. If we see an S3 bucket being created, we would ideally want server-side encryption to be turned on. And then basic guidelines around all of it, right? Uh, And one of the last portion of this puzzle is cost factor. When devs check in a resource, they might not do research around what resource they're introducing and how much that resource actually cost. I've worked on teams where developers would just on a staging environment create a DB X large and then have it multi-AZ and then management comes up the next day and is like, why did we spend $2,000 in a single day? That is not something that we want, right? So that is what my skill also tries to solve at the base layer itself. Before they actually check in the code, they'll get real-time feedback around the things that they're trying to check in. And then the skill itself is not very detailed, but we have a security checklist, a cost reference, some best practices from AWS that we try to solve. And the best practices does not have to come from AWS. If there's a industry or a company standard that you try to follow in your AWS environments, you can check that here as well. And then last but not the least, we have the tagging policy as well. If a resource is being created, we want that to be tagged properly. So we have a tagging policy. The skill was running for a while in the other panel. So we'll just review the kind of feedback. Say I as a developer was trying to check in the code, right? So what is the kind of feedback that I'll get? So this is before an actual PR is raised. So no DevOps person is being bothered currently. It's a very deep feedback. So yeah, the first step is tag compliance. I can see that I just gave a name tag to my VPC and all the other tags are absent. So I get feedback, okay, tags are missing in my resource. I have to introduce those as well. And then it gives you feedback also, real-time feedback. So the skill sees that you have missed adding all the tags, right? And it will give you a provider and a default tag that you can add to your resources, and then all of these tags would be introduced. So it tells you what the problem is and a bit of hint to how to solve that particular problem. It also detects hard-coded values. We don't ideally want to use hard-coded values in our infrastructure as code, basically an anti-pattern and sometimes a security risk as well, right? It detected that we had AWS. These are dummy AWS keys. So, but for this demonstration, it also detected, right? It marked it and it's read also. You are trying to check in secrets in the code itself. That is not remove it entirely. Use IAM roles or environment variables. So this is the kind of feedback that devs get in real time. So that this is something that is not expected. Sometimes what happens is if the repo that everybody is contributing to is public, as soon as this is checked in, the credential gets exposed and it's a huge security issue, right? So this prevents it before it's actually sent into the GitHub servers. So they get a local feedback saying, we don't want to do this. We want to remove this entirely, use IAM roles or environment variables. We don't also want to hard code AZs because the resources that are being created might run in a different AZ later, right? So anything that should not be hard coded is what the feedback covers. It also does a security deep dive. One of the critical ones, as I just mentioned, is it detects AWS secret and access keys and tells it. And context also, it tells you an attacker who reads this file via public repo, leaked artifact, or gets full access to your system based on the permissions that you have. Remove both lines entirely. Yeah. And then network ACL. So in our security audit, we saw a lot of uh, SSH inbound rules open to the public as well, right? So if this developer were to read this feedback and implement it, that will be solved at the source only. The DevOps person don't have to jump in and fix the resource. So it tells you the security group that you're trying to implement has traffic open from everywhere. You should ideally close this down. And the database also. Some couple of feedback around encryption and data protection. You should have volumes currently do not have ABS encryption, right? So we should set it to true. Critical plain text DB in source code, we should keep them as AWS secret. So it is something that is recommended by the skill itself to use AWS Secret Manager. Logging and monitoring, there was no logging. So it is asking the developer to have some sort of a logging in place. No cloud trail, no cloud watch alarms defined. Ideally, we should have that as well. Critical RDS, publicly accessible databases by default should not be publicly accessible. So some feedback around that. And then best practices review. We don't have a remote backend for Terraform. That is best. That is not best practice. Required version. Everything else. And then how to actually solve that also. If you want to add a remote backend, you can do something like this. Backend S3. If you want to extract the variables, you can keep it in a different variables or Terraform file and how to actually set that up. Updated provider, how it would look like before and after. So it's actually taking the hard-coded credentials and moving them to environment variables as well. And then the cost optimization, cost estimation. The developers, since he's new to this whole thing, and we don't expect developers to know what every instance type costs, right? They might reference from the the instance itself. If it's an X large, it will obviously be expensive. It gives you detail around that as well. So if you are doing a T2 micro, it will cost you around this per month. And then AWS instance or massive instance. So this is very high. So by default, if the developer is doing a wrong instance type, and if the effect of that would be very high AWS bills, so this review points that out as well. If you go ahead and create a resource of this type, the pricing would be around $3,000 per month. And then it'll give you the estimated monthly cost as well. It's a very expensive resource. All of that will cost. Uh, Developers would not want something as big to run on our staging environments, right? So they get a total estimate of real-time feedback of if they go ahead and actually create this resource. This is what the company will pay every month uh, compared to every year. And then the cost optimization is almost certainly widely provisioned. You should pick a lower base instance, and then lastly the overall summary. So this coming from a DevOps engineer will be a ping pong, right? The developers would first raise the PR, we would review everything, and then and the thing about manual reviews is we might miss a bunch of these as well. We might see something that is very obvious. I think AWS hard-coded credentials is something very obvious. Will point that out. The extra large instance is something that will point that out. But to have a review this extensive, I think is something that should be automated in every workflow. So yeah, the we as DevOps folks, since we know the inside and out of how infrastructure is laid out, we write the actual skills. We check them into the repos as well. Developers write the infrastructure code. They run the review skills, and then they get instant feedback. They fix it locally, and then a clean commit. So no wasting time on the developers part, no wasting time on the DevOps part as well. Yeah. The last use case. So, say you are working in an environment that does not have Claude or any of these AI tools, right? You just have a simple, boring AWS UI that you have to work with. What can I do in that front? Is there something that we can automate? Yeah. So why Amazon Q, right? Amazon Q is preferable because it sits right in the AWS console. I'll just quickly give you a demo of it so that it makes the most sense. I'll go back to my training account. And uh, if you're coming from a non DevOps background, the CLI and everything else might not be as uh, easily UI friendly to you, right? It might be a bit intimidating. So the easiest thing that we can do is I have AWS open in my window. Now what we can do is Amazon Q, the one logo that you see here is basically a chat agent from AWS where we can send it human language commands and then try to understand some of our AWS resource using that. So I'll just go back. So say I do something like the cost explorer example that I took, right? Doing that manually will take a lot of time. So as someone from management or someone who's not very familiar with the whole DevOps and pipeline flow, if I just log into AWS and the only thing I'm concerned about is how much did I spend on data transfer charges per month? So how do I get that information? I don't know Cost Explorer. I don't know anything else. This can work as a chat agent for you and tell you how everything's working. So how much did we spend for data transfer cost per month? And this is a very new offering from Amazon. So Amazon is quickly improving on top of it. You might hit into some issues, but as times goes by, I think this will try to get better and better. So yeah, I just asked here how much did we spend on data transfer cost per month, and it has access to all the AWS API resources, so it'll query them, get that information out, and then present it in a very human readable format that someone can just take a look at and get an idea, right? I'll keep that running for some time. I'll just quickly zoom in so it's a bit more visible. So see, all of the data is still coming from Cost Explorer, but we're just uh, removing the hard interface that it has. And coming back to the AI agent versus agent skills, since in my agent skills I had specific instructions on how to get that billing, it was very fast, right? Compared to what this is doing. The AI agent here is first trying to understand how to query it and then goes ahead and curate it. So that takes a bit of more time compared to doing this via agent skills. And this gives you a brief report on what the data transfer charges was, right? Let me just try to open this. Yeah. And this is the overall report. On January, we didn't spend a lot on data transfer charges. Everything stayed in the account itself. February, we spent a bit more. And then March was the significant spike. Data transfer out of the internet. And then usual stats around the questions that I'm asking, right? NAT gateway hours, log delivery, inter-region transfer, and then a high level summary of what it had absorbed. So if you are currently in an ecosystem where you don't have access to Claude or any of these AI tools, you can use something that is built into AWS itself for some of these automations. So yeah, Amazon Q, it's built. You can either use it through the console itself, or you can download it and use it within your IDE as well. So yeah, for DevOps teams, we can use it for troubleshooting and diagnostic. What I usually use it for is if I have to quickly get some data out, right? And I don't really remember the CLI commands for it, and it's a very long CLI or a complex CLI command. I can just go through the console itself. I don't have to worry about setting up my credentials first, the assume role and the entire process. I can just go to the Amazon Q chat, ask it the simple question, and then just get the data out. And then it comes for developers as well. So you can use it for code completion and whatever use cases that developers usually have. So it comes with a free tier, the one that I showed you, and then you can have a pro tier as well. Yeah. So basically, the point of this particular session was that we all use AI differently. I just walk through some of the use cases that I follow, my opinionated way of choosing the tools that I choose here, right? And then some of the use cases that we have to follow on a day-to-day basis. I hope, yeah, the key takeaways from this, right? Agent skills are reusable. We want to stick to using it because they're an open standard. Because they're an open standard, we can create as many skills as they want. We don't have to rely to Claude being up, ChatGPT being up, or any of the major AI tools. We can use it across different tools, right? AI-driven cost optimization is easy to do because the reports are instant. If our feedback from our infrastructure is instant, it's easier to remediate those things, right? Developer feedback is something that is very welcome. We want developers to contribute more to infrastructure. A developer who knows his infrastructure is a asset to the team, right? That's what we want. We don't want them to shy away from looking at infrastructure. And if they want to contribute to infrastructure, we should have workflows and agents skills that give them real-time feedback on how they can improve. And then if you don't have access to all of this, you can use Amazon Q, the UI as well, to ease up some of your load. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for everyone for joining.